Good morning, mathematicians. Today we're taking a look at Lesson 4.2, which is a review of basic decimal concepts. Our whole goal of the lesson is to review basic concepts and notation for decimals through the hundredths place. Our math message states 1 flat equals how many longs. 1 long equals how many cubes. 1 flat is how many cubes. Remember that this was your flat, this whole big board with those 100 squares, and then the longs were each of these pieces inside. So if I did this correctly, how many longs should there be on a flat? Right, there should be 10 longs. 1 long is how many cubes then? 10. So if there's 10 longs in here, and each long is worth 10, how many cubes are there total? 10. We will be using this to help us understand some different fraction and decimal concepts today. Okay, take a look at this story problem. It says Stuart drank 3/4 of a carton of juice. In this situation, the carton of juice is the one, or the whole. Remember that every single fractional part has to have a whole that goes with it. There's two different ways that we can spell whole. Whole with a W, or whole without a W. Remember, this one is like a hole in the ground. That's not the whole we want. When we're talking about one whole, it's W-H-O-L-E. In this problem, Mary had $5. She spent half of it on baseball cards. So in this situation, Mary's $5 is the one, or the whole. Okay, so we know that this is a whole flat here. This is like our whole. So 1 long equals what fraction of the whole? Right, it would be 1 out of 10, or 1/10, because there's 1 long. This would be our 1 long shaded in, out of 10 total. So 3 longs is what fraction? 3/10. 5 longs is 5/10, which is the same as 1/2. And 13 longs is 13/10, which is the same as 1 whole and 3 more out of 10. We know that 1 cube would be this much shaded in. What fraction of this whole is 1 cube? Good, 1/100th. 13 cubes then is 13/100ths. How about 4 longs and 2 cubes? Well, we know 4 longs is 40 cubes, plus 2 more is 42, so it's 42/100ths. Now, if we're given the fraction, let's write it as a decimal. So 2/10 is telling us that 2 out of 10 of the rows are shaded in. Notice when we say 2/10, a fraction and decimal is read exactly the same. So 2/10, we'd have the decimal point, the 2 in the 10th place, and just a 0 placeholder out front. So here, 2/10, the fraction, is the same as 2/10, the decimal. How would we write 7/10 as a decimal? Right, 0.7, which is called 7/10. 3/100ths is 0.03, or 3/100ths. Keep in mind for this one, we do need to put the 3 in the hundredths place because it's a very small amount that's shaded in. It's just these 3 little cubes. So in order to show it's a cube, it has to go in the hundredths. The tenths are here. How about 3 and 24/100ths? Right, we'd write the number 3.24, so it's read 3 and 24/100ths. Here again, I'm going to give you some fractions, and you need to talk them through as a decimal with your partner. So we have 3/10, 27/100ths, 4/100ths, 7 and 59/100ths, 6/10, 4/10. My reminder to you is that you read the decimal the same way as its fraction equivalent. Go ahead and turn and talk about how to write these fractions as a decimal. 3/10 as a decimal. is 3/10. 27 hundredths is 0.27, 27 hundredths. 4 hundredths is 0.04 because we need the 4 in the hundredths place. 7 and 59 hundredths. 6 tenths. 4 tenths. Notice that we do put a 0 in front of the decimal point just to show that there are 0 whole numbers here. On the other page we had 3 hundredths, and we had written that is 0.03. Notice how these two are different. 3 tenths, 3 hundredths, written as a decimal, 3 tenths, 3 hundredths. Why do we have to put the 3 all the way over here and put this extra 0 when it's 3 hundredths, but not when it's 3 tenths? Today when you get into your math journal, there's a reminder of what page in the reference book you can look at if you need to review how to write a fraction as a decimal. They're going to remind you up at the top that the flat is this symbol, it's a square, the value is 1 whole. A long, you just write as a line, which is the same as 1/10 as a fraction, 1/10 as a decimal. A cube, you can just put a dot. It's the same as 1/100th as a fraction, 1/100th as a decimal. So you're going to be completing the table. They tell you what the base 10 blocks would look like. You write it as a fraction, you write it as a decimal. So for example, this first one has 2 longs. We know a long is a tenth. So we have 1/10, 2 tenths. So we write 2 tenths. As a decimal then we write the 0.2. I was really glad to see that yesterday many of you were really using your learning journey sheet to mark off which activities you did. Use this as a guide for what you do today. First thing is the MathMaster page 426 modeling decimals. We did this in the lesson, so you may cross that off. Then you're going to do the Math Journal page 80, the page I just showed you. Based on this, your teacher is going to have you write an exit slip at the end of math today, explaining the difference between 9/10 and 9/100. Remember, we already did this when we talked about 3/10 or 3/100 and how it's different. We talked about how it would look different on a 1 whole, just having 3 little parts, compared to 3/10. And we talked about how it's different as a fraction, having 3/10, which is 1 0 in the denominator, or 3/100 with 2 zeros. All right, so you have Math Journal page 80, math boxes, and then baseball multiplication. Math Masters will be in my room. Notice the blend space today is again for activity B, you're doing day 1B. Activity C, you need to do a Math Masters page called the 1, and then do the blend space unit 4, day 1C again.